A seemingly kind neighbour destroyed my family business, forged signatures, leaked my private medical records, and turned my life into a nightmare. From $156,000 in debt to betrayal at every turn, this is my story of survival, panic attacks, and reclaiming my life. Witness the shocking truth behind the whispers and lies in this emotional journey. I can still hear the gasps echoing through the church hall the night I exposed her. The sound was sharp, almost like glass breaking, and for a moment, it felt like the entire town finally saw what I'd been screaming into the void for years. My parents' faces drained of colour, my cousin Samuel's hand gripped my shoulder, and over my 58-year-old neighbour, the woman who had been treated like family, just sat there with her perfect little smile, as if she'd won. But she hadn't. Not anymore. What led me to that moment? A $156,000 mortgage, a forged signature, and a lifetime of being told I was paranoid. What led me there was the realization that everything I thought was safe, my family's business, my identity, even my own thoughts, was just ammunition for her cruelty. When I was a kid, Ava was the kind of neighbour everyone trusted. She smelled faintly of baby powder, always carrying casseroles to church dinners, always quick with a story about her grandkids. She used to pinch my cheek and say, "Timothy, you've got the kind of face that belongs on a billboard." I believed her. Everyone did. Our family owned a small landscaping company, steady work, decent money, and a kind of business where reputation mattered more than advertising. By the time I was 15, I was learning the ropes, working after school with Samuel. That's when Ava started showing up more often. She'd drop by during dinner, pretending she had paperwork questions or friendly advice about business permits. My parents thought it was neighbourly concern. I thought it was odd, but I stayed quiet. The first red flag came 5 years ago. I was scrolling online late at night and saw a fake profile with my photo. The account had my name, my school, even my birthday. But the posts, they were filled with disgusting stuff, racist comments, threats, things I would never say. I panicked. When I showed my mom, she sighed and said, "It's probably just a dumb prank, Tim, don't feed into it." But it wasn't a prank. At first, it was just whispers. I'd walk to the corner store and hear neighbours say things like, "That boy's been acting out online." I'd get looks at church, the kind where people force a smile but you can see the judgment underneath. When I sat down for Sunday service, people shifted a little farther away. My hands would sweat my chest height. It was the first time I felt panic rising like a physical wave. I remember one evening dinner was roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the usual comfort meal. My dad was mid-bite when his phone buzzed. He frowned and passed it to my mom. "It's the bank," he muttered. That was the night we found out someone had been applying for loans in my dad's name. Tens of thousands all tied back to us. The number that made my dad choke was $156,000. That was the new mortgage we didn't sign up for. The family photo on the mantle, the one with all of us smiling in front of the business van, suddenly felt like a lie. And yet Ava was always right there, offering sympathy. Saying, "Oh dear, identity theft is everywhere these days, you poor things." She even baked us cookies after we told her. My mom cried and hugged her. I just stared. Something about the way she lingered in our kitchen that night made my skin crawl. Hospital food. That's another detail burned into my memory. A few weeks later, I ended up in the ER after my first real panic attack. My chest locked up and I thought I was dying. Samuel drove me, holding my hand the whole way, trying to calm me. I remember the bland taste of the cafeteria spaghetti, how the sauce was watery and metallic. It felt symbolic, like my whole life had been drained of flavour. That night, I started depression medication. For a while, it dulled the edges. But I didn't know then how much worse it was going to get, how much deeper Ava's claws were already buried in my life. Final red flag of that stage came when I opened my email one evening and saw a notification, "Your password has been changed." Except it wasn't me. My entire inbox, my job applications, school essays, therapy notes was gone. Deleted or stolen. I felt my throat tighten, my body go cold. Someone wasn't just messing with me anymore. Someone was dismantling me piece by piece. And when I heard Ava humming outside our window that night, pretending to water her roses in the dark, I knew. I just couldn't prove it. 5 years ago it started as small annoyances, a dropped package, a lost invoice. I remember June 12, 2020 when I found a permit in the office drawer with a county seal that didn't match. At the time I shrugged it off, paperwork gets messy. That day was the hinge. Samuel noticed too. "Tim, this is way beyond coincidence," he said one humid afternoon under the oak behind 412 Maple Street. He was 32, practical, steady. When he looked worried, my stomach dropped. The red flags multiplied. On August 3, 2021 at 9:07 a.m, my employer called about invoices that had been paid and reversed. My phone filled with blocked numbers. I started getting emails with screenshots of private conversations from my therapist sessions I'd had at 2:15 p.m. on September 9, 2021 twisted into accusations. How did they get those notes? I suspected someone inside the clinic. I went to the police on October 4, 2021 at 11:30 a.m. and sat in the precinct on 18 River Road explaining identity theft and forgery. Officer Carter took my statement but stalled on the IP logs. Later, Whisper said he'd had unexplained cash deposits and a new car. It felt like shutting into a field of indifference. Neighbours' whispers hardened into avoidance. Miss S. Lang at 7 Birch Lane crossed the street when she saw me. Teens at the laundromat pointed and smirked. The church potluck on November 14, 2021 at 6:00 p.m. Someone knocked over the green bean tray near me. People slid their chairs away. My mom laughed too loudly. The hospital cafeteria spaghetti after my ER visit tasted metallic and flat like everything had been drained of flavour. Samuel became my shield. He stayed up until 2 a.m, on calls with banks and credit bureaus, met our lawyer on December 1, 2021 at 10:30 a.m., printed logs and compared dates. Every lead evaporated, signatures copied expertly, IP addresses anonymized, transfers routed through shell counts. In February 2022, Samuel found a scanned copy of my dad's signature on a loan dated March 2, 2021, notarized with a P, or box I recognized of as at 88 Willow Lane. No way, I whispered, hands shaking. We drove there at 10:45 p.m. Samuel knocked. Her porch light glowed. She opened at 11:02 p.m., smiled that smile. Timothy, come in, I've been worried. She invited us for tea. We declined. Her ease made my skin crawl. The messages got nastier, threats that mentioned the year my brother left for college, the exact phrase my mother used about the mortgage. Someone knew granular things about our life. It wasn't random harassment anymore, it was targeted. My depression had started to fail by March 2022. Nights stretched thin. I woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding, replaying conversations until my head throbbed. Panic attacks came unexpectedly walking past the church at 5:45 p.m., hearing a familiar laugh, seeing a neighbour's face. Trust-frayed, I developed nightmares where signatures sprouted teeth and chewed through the pages of our lives. The worst thing was a clinic leak. One afternoon I confronted Dr. Mendes in his small office at 121 Elm Street. You gave them my notes, I said, voice cracking. He avoided my eyes. I shared context with a concerned neighbour, he murmured, then reached for a folder. Medical privacy betrayed for gossip. My stomach dropped like someone had handed me a stone. Officer Cotter brushed off my follow-ups. We'll add it to the file, he said on March 14, 2022 at 2:20 p.m., which meant nothing. Samuel started tracing payments and found small deposits accounts linked to people in our Tam Church fundraiser amounts routed, then the checks deterred. The suggestion that Ava might be laundering money through favours and legal loopholes stopped being conspiracy and started being plausible. Social reactions turned clinical. At 7:00 p.m., the delivery driver refused to come to our door. At 8:30 p.m., another neighbour whispered, you should move. The family photo on the mantel smiling in front of the green van felt like a postcard from a life that had been sold out from under us. My reputation was eroding, people treated me like a problem to manage. I became a cautionary tale. Samuel and I kept digging. Each new piece fit the same ugly picture, forged signatures, stolen identities, inside help, and people who closed ranks when money or favours were involved. The more we found, the clearer the pattern. This wasn't petty mean-spiritedness. It was organised, quiet, and cruel, and it used our community as cover. We still didn't know the whole architecture of it, but we knew one thing, pointing at Ava made us smile wider, and every time she smiled the town's judgment sharpened against me. It wasn't until July 15, 2022, during a routine therapy session at 2:45 p.m, that the full scope hit me. I was sitting in Dr. Lee's office, the faint scent of baby powder from my newborn in the waiting area wafting through the vent, when he slid a folder across the table. Timothy, I think you need to see this, he said. Inside were copies of legal documents, loans, property transfers, vendor contracts all signed with my father's signature. Except some had mine forged too. My throat went dry. My pulse thumped painfully in my ears. I had nearly gone to jail. Nearly lost everything. I remember standing there, the window open, tasting the hospital cafeteria's bland spaghetti from lunch still lingering in my mouth. The realization hit like a truck. Ava wasn't just a cruel neighbour. She had meticulously dismantled our family, piece by piece, and had people in our own circle complicit. My doctor, Officer Carter, possibly others I hadn't even identified yet. The social fallout was immediate. On the evening of July 16, 2022, I went to a small church gathering at 6:30 p.m. for a cousin's birthday. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt the stares. Whispers followed me down the aisle. Did you hear what happened with their business? I can't believe they let that happen. Faces twisted in discomfort or maybe disgust. My pulse accelerated, my hands shook, and I wanted to vanish. Samuel grabbed my arm and murmured, ignore them, we'll fix this. But it wasn't just whispers. Friends I trusted began to treat me like I had been the problem all along. Colleagues at part-time jobs gave me curt responses. Strangers on the street avoided eye contact or walked around me. The identity theft had made me hypervigilant. Every phone buzz triggered panic. Every notification had the potential to reveal another attack. I was living in constant fear. At home, it was no better. I started developing nightmares. I dream of Ava standing over me, smiling, while my own signature danced on documents in flames. My depression medication, once a lifeline, had stopped working entirely. Even after adjusting doses, therapy, and regular sessions with Dr. Lee, nothing dulled the anxiety. Panic attacks came in waves. I began checking off finances obsessively, triple-checking emails, questioning everyone I met. Trust was gone. Then came the secondary betrayal. On July 29, 2022, Samuel discovered financial transfers from my father's account to a shell company linked directly to Ava. He confronted Dr. Mendes, my former physician. Why did you hand over Timothy's private records? Samuel demanded. Dr. Mendes looked pointed. I thought it was harmless, he said. She seemed worried. She promised she'd help. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Ava had done. Even my therapist's office had been breached, my privacy sold for convenience and gossip. The local police department's corruption worsened the trauma. Officer Carter ignored repeated evidence submissions, and Samuel uncovered deposits he hadn't accounted for, cash amounts that coincided suspiciously with hospital bills and therapy payments. The law, which was supposed to protect me, had failed. Even worse, I discovered that the network of abuse extended beyond me. Vendors, church members, and even our accountant had been manipulated to unknowingly participate in the scheme. Ava had been living in plain sight, orchestrating a network of deception and financial abuse, all while wearing the mask of a caring neighbour. The psychological impact was overwhelming. I was hyper-aware, panicked at small noises, and filled with trust issues. Even Samuel noticed subtle changes. I flinched when the phone rang, jumped at shadows, and woke screaming in the night. I could barely look at the family photo on the mantel without feeling anger, shame, and grief all at once. Therapy sessions became both a refuge and a battlefield. By August 2022, my life felt fractured. The social consequences were visible in every interaction. Church members avoided eye contact. Colleagues whispered behind closed doors, and neighbours crossed the street when they saw me. People treated me as if I was guilty by association, as if the destruction of Aurora had been my fault. Every revelation drove me deeper into isolation. But at the same time, it made me hungrier for the truth. Each forged signature, each stolen password, each whispered accusation became fuel. I couldn't undo the past, but I could prepare for the moment when everything would come out. And I knew that moment had to be public. I just didn't know yet exactly how explosive it would be. Graduation day was supposed to be a milestone, a marker of survival through years of stress, financial collapse, and relentless cyber harassment. It was June 12, 2023 at 5:30 p.m, the church all packed with friends, family, and neighbours. I sat in the third row, hands clammy, heart hammering. The family photo on the mantel at home flashed in my mind, all smiles, all lies. Today, I was going to confront those lies. Ava was in the audience, front row, her pearls catching the light. She smiled at me as if nothing had happened, her presence a twisted reminder of every stolen paycheck, every panic attack, every tear I had shed alone in my room. My palms were sweaty, my depression medication no longer offered a shield. I took a deep breath and remembered Samuel's words, "You know the truth, that's your power." When my name was called, I walked to the podium, every whisper in the hall brushing against me like fingernails on glass. I started with a shaky voice. "Before I accept this diploma, there's something I need to say," I began. The audience stiffened, parents exchanged worried glances. Ava's smile never faltered. "I've been the target of cyber harassment, identity theft, and financial fraud," I said, voice rising. "My own neighbour, Ava, forged signatures on critical documents. She bankrupted our family business and stole from us. My therapist's notes were leaked, my private medical information was shared, and the police ignored it. I almost went to jail because of her." The hall went silent. Gasps erupted. My parents' faces went pale. Ava's hand trembled as she clutched her purse, but she tried to compose herself. I held the audience's gaze. "She used my trust, my love, and my dedication to our family to destroy me. She didn't just hurt me, she hurt everyone around me." Then came the twist I had uncovered days before, and there's more. She didn't just act alone. My doctor, bribed police officers, and even some community members were complicit. But I learned the real reason she adopted me into her circle years ago. It wasn't kindness, it was money laundering, legal loopholes, and control. A low murmur ran through the crowd. I could see people shifting uncomfortably, whispers spreading faster than wildfire. Ava's face flushed red, her mouth opening and closing, searching for words. "Timothy, that's it," she stammered. "No," I interrupted, voice steadier now, adrenaline sharpening my clarity. "You won't speak over this. You won't hide behind smiles anymore." The room felt like it was vibrating with tension. My parents sank into their chairs, disbelief etched into their features. Samuel's hand on my shoulder was the only anchor I had, grounding me as the years of trauma, betrayal, and sleepless nights culminated in this moment. "You see," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "I would have done anything for her. I trusted her completely, and she used it to destroy me emotionally, financially, socially. But today, I reclaim my story." Ava finally stood, lips quivering. "You're exaggerating, Timothy," she hissed. But no one believed her. The audience was already reeling from the timeline, the forged documents, the leaked medical records. Phones were out, whispers turned to gasps, and my story spread like wildfire in that small church hall. I could see the secondary betrayals reflected on faces in the crowd, people who thought they were helping, but had been manipulated into complicity. Samuel leaned closer. "They're all listening. You're finally free," he whispered. When I finished, silence fell like a heavy blanket. I stepped down, heart pounding but clear-headed for the first time in years. Ava tried to leave quietly, but the pastor blocked the door. "We need to discuss this," he said firmly. The church's sacred space had become the site of reckoning. The fallout was immediate. My parents, shaken but supportive, promised to rebuild our business. Samuel arranged legal counsel and secured evidence of Ava's network. Neighbours who whispered now avoided Ava. My reputation, once shredded, began the slow process of repair because the truth was finally public. That night, back home at 10:15 p.m, I stared at the family photo on the mantel. The image of happy smiles felt bittersweet, but now I knew it represented survival. I had faced the person who had stolen everything, revealed the lies to the world, and started reclaiming my life. For the first time in years, I slept without nightmares, though the scars would remain. For the first time, I realised the fight wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming trust, identity, and dignity. The weeks after graduation were surreal. It should have been relief, but instead, I felt raw, exposed, and hollow. The confrontation had aired the truth, yes, but the reality of what Ava had done and what so many others had enabled hit me harder than I expected. I remember sitting in my bedroom on June 20, 2023, staring at the family photo on the mantel. My parents had finally taken it down and left it leaning against the wall. The smiles in the picture mocked me. I felt betrayed by everything, neighbours, authorities, even my own body, which refused to respond to the depression medication that had once helped. The pills no longer worked. They were a hollow promise. At 3:17 a.m, I woke from a nightmare. Ava's grin filled the room. Papers with my forged signatures floated around me like ghosts, whispering accusations, threats. My heart raced, cold sweat soaking my shirt. The panic attack lasted an hour. Samuel found me rocking on the floor at 5:02 a.m., whispering, "You're not alone, Tim. You're not alone." Therapy became my lifeline again, but it was grueling. Sessions now included emergency counselling 3 times a week. I discussed Dr. Lee's notes, the leaks, Officer Cotta's bribery, and the emotional trauma of betrayal on multiple levels. I admitted things I hadn't before: fear of leaving the house, distrust of strangers, waking up in the middle of the night convinced that someone was watching. My social isolation was profound. Friends had drifted, colleagues avoided me, and neighbours crossed the street whenever I walked by. Every interaction felt like a minefield. During a hospital visit on July 8, 2023, the cafeteria food tasted metallic, the mashed potatoes oddly dry, and the fluorescent lights made my chest tight. I felt like the world was suffocating me. Small noises triggered panic attacks: the hum of a fridge, the baby powder scent from a passing stroller, the creak of a door. Trust had been rewired. Even my own parents worried about how fragile I had become. Financially, we were still reeling. The $156,000 mortgage hung over us like a guillotine. Every day involved calls to banks, filing reports, trying to untangle the mess I had left behind. I felt hopeless. Weeks turned into months of paperwork, court dates, and stress-induced insomnia. The social repercussions were merciless. On July 21, 2023, at a church committee meeting, I overheard someone whisper, "I can't believe his family let that happen." Even those who didn't know the full story treated me with quiet suspicion. Public shame had become a constant companion. I couldn't go anywhere without sensing judgment in the air, every glance heavy with unspoken assumptions. And yet, the psychological toll was worst. I had nightmares almost nightly. I started questioning every relationship, every gesture of kindness. Samuel became my anchor, but even his presence couldn't erase the years of rewired thinking. I had to constantly remind myself the betrayal was hers, not mine. At 9:43 p.m. on August 2, 2023, I sat alone in my room after a therapy session. My knees were pulled to my chest. I realized how far I had fallen. I had been consumed by panic, anger, and despair. I had trusted a network of people: my doctor, police, even neighbours, and all had betrayed me in some way. A sense of helplessness was suffocating. I tried to keep a journal, writing down every incident, every panic attack, every small victory. Some days, I barely wrote a word. Other days, the pages filled with trembling letters documenting every stolen signature, every threatening message, every moment of I had used my love for her as a weapon. The act of recording became both therapy and a reminder of how far I had yet to climb. Even at my lowest, Samuel never left my side. He organised legal documents, arranged for private security checks, and reminded me that despite the community's whispers, my reputation could be repaired. But emotionally, I felt broken. The hospital cafeteria meals, the baby powder scent, the small town glances, they became symbols of every betrayal, every stolen ounce of peace. At the end of August 2023, I realised I was living in the aftermath of a war. Every night was a battle against panic, depression, and memory. My identity had been stolen, my social fabric torn, and my trust obliterated. Yet somewhere deep inside, a fragile ember of resolve remained. I wanted to survive, to reclaim my life, to prove that the trauma, though devastating, would not define me forever. Recovery began quietly, almost imperceptibly. September 1, 2023, I walked into Dr. Lee's office at 2:30 p.m., clutching my journal. The panic attacks hadn't stopped entirely, but for the first time, I felt like I could map them, track triggers, and respond instead of being paralysed. Therapy shifted from survival mode to rebuilding mode. We worked on grounding techniques, cognitive restructuring, and slowly unpacking the trust issues that Alva's manipulation had created. Step 1 was regaining control over my finances. Samuel and I spent weeks auditing every account. We replaced passwords, secured our documents, and created a fail-safe system. Slowly, the $156,000 mortgage, though still daunting, began to feel manageable because we were no longer fighting blind. Every small victory, paying a bill, closing a suspicious account, verifying a transaction, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Step 2 was reclaiming my identity. I worked with cybersecurity experts to remove the fake accounts and forged documents. The sense of paranoia lingered, but as I saw the digital trail of Alva's manipulation unravel, I realized the world was not entirely against me. People began to see me as resilient, not damaged. My reputation, once shredded, began to mend because I had evidence, courage, and the truth on my side. Socially, the change was slower. Some neighbours remained distant, whispers faded but didn't vanish. Church gatherings were tense at first, but as I engaged honestly and openly, the community began to adjust. Samuel's presence remained vital. He reminded me that trust could be rebuilt slowly, selectively. I learned to set boundaries and recognize the difference between genuine concern and hidden agendas. Psychologically, the transformation was gradual. Nightmares became less frequent. Panic attacks reduced in intensity and duration. I learned to recognize triggers: hospital cafeterias, the faint scent of baby powder, sudden foreign vibrations, and respond with grounding techniques, deep breathing, mindfulness, and journaling. My depression medication was recalibrated, and for the first time in years, I felt it working again. The most important step, though, was forgiving myself. For so long, I had blamed myself for trusting Alva, for missing the early warning signs, for believing in others who betrayed me. But through therapy and reflection, I realized none of it was my fault. The lies, the fraud, the manipulation, they were hers alone. Forgiving myself didn't erase the trauma, but it lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I also rebuilt the family business with Samuel's help. We downsized, streamlined operations, and took on smaller, more manageable projects. The green van, once a symbol of stolen dreams, now carried tools and supplies under our care. Every client interaction, every successful project felt like a reclamation of dignity. On October 12, 2023, I returned to the church not for a gathering, but to sit quietly. I looked at the pews, the faces, and realized I had survived a war. I had endured betrayal, public shame, financial ruin, and psychological trauma. But I had also grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I could sit in the same space where whispers and judgment once haunted me and feel calm. By December, I had a new routine: therapy 3 times a week, meditation in the mornings, regular check-ins with Samuel, and occasional community volunteer work. Every action reinforced my sense of agency. I was no longer a victim of circumstance, I was a survivor in control of my life. The family photo now hangs above my desk, restored and reframed. But instead of seeing it as a reminder of betrayal, I see it as a reminder of endurance. We survived. I survived. And most importantly, I forgave myself. I learned that resilience doesn't mean forgetting trauma or pretending it never happened. It means facing shadows, reclaiming what was stolen, and walking forward with purpose. Av's actions shattered my trust, my financial security, and my mental peace, but they did not destroy my spirit. Today, I'm stronger, more self-aware, and prepared for life's challenges. I no longer flinch at whispers, no longer fear the phone ringing. I build a life where I control the narrative, and I carry the lessons of betrayal and recovery as tools, not chains. I forgave myself. I reclaimed my life. And I finally understand that none of Av's lies, manipulations, or cruelty was ever my